Hello world, hello Facebook, hello all those watching this on listenvisionlive.com. It's the Nitty Gritty Show. It's your boy Jay DeCosta.
It's your girl Katniss.
And together we are the Nitty Gritty.
It's Tim Wise. You're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
Everybody, this is Stevie Powell. You're now watching the Nitty Gritty Show. Check it out.
And so I'm DeCosta, and you need to watch the Nitty Gritty Show.
My name is Sherman Moss, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
That's the Grant Thompson, a.k.a. G. Ainsworth, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
I'm Anthony White, and this is the Nitty Gritty Show.
Yeah. Bam, it's Jay Thompson. You're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
You are watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
My name is Jay Grant Thompson, and guess what? You're in tune to the Nitty Gritty Show.
I'm Will Jawando, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
Hey, my name is Mitch Holmes, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
And my name is Peter DeCosta, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
This is Pastor Rob, and you're on the Nitty Gritty Show.
I'm Ray Pittman, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
Hey, this is Joni Ford of Ford Wellness, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
Yo, what's going on? It's your boy Benny Black, and you are watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
It's time for the Nitty Gritty. Conversations get real loud. It's time for the Nitty Gritty. The revolution's not televised. It's time for the Nitty Gritty. Reaching out to your conscious mind. It's time for the Nitty Gritty. More than talking, taking action. It's time for the Nitty.
Hello world, what's going on Facebook? Everybody catching us live on listenvisionlive.com, or you might be following us the next day or two because you're on YouTube. But hey, what's going on? It's the Nitty Gritty Show. It's your boy Jay DeCosta.
And it's your girl Katniss.
And together we are
The Nitty Gritty.
Excited to have Will Smith on the show. I had to say it like that first. I know it's Will Smith Jr.
Yeah.
But I know you get that all the time, right? People see Will Smith and like
all the time. But it worked in high school. It'll work now. So I'm glad I get some benefit from it. But
like, we're gonna vote him in the president one day. Will Smith. I know that name.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But you got Will C. Smith Jr.
Yep.
In here today, Maryland State Senator. Representing the 20th district, right?
20th district, Silver Spring and Tacoma Park in Montgomery County, Maryland. Yep.
Yeah, so and that's an area I can vote in.
That's right.
So if you
me too.
When you go up for election again, or if you decide to go on to other things, which I hope eventually sometime you'll go that direction. Yep. We're definitely gonna give you a holler, make sure we bring you back on the show, and then we're gonna support you too.
All right, appreciate it.
You're in a lot of good company. I know you know Marilyn Pierre, who was just on the show.
Yeah, she's a good friend.
Will Jawando, Michael White. You're familiar with all these folks,
and even Will Jawando's wife. We know her too.
That's right.
Yeah. So it seems like everybody's in good company out here. So that's good. That makes us feel good. Like we're getting the right people on.
That's right. Well, it's good because it's all kind of part of the next generation's moving up.
Yeah.
It's good to see a lot of positive people doing a lot of good things. You got people running for judge, for county council, state senate, delegate, everything, Congress. So it's really good to see the next generation, all of us coming up together and supporting each other too. So it's good stuff. Yeah.
And then talking about coming up together, I mean, a lot of you literally came up together. So I know you were born and raised in Silver Spring.
That's right.
Also, first in your family to actually attend college. But then not only did you attend, I mean, you really rocked out. You went to William & Mary, then you went on to receive your master's from Johns Hopkins, graduated from William & Mary Law School.
That's right.
So that's pretty awesome. I'm pretty sure your family's super proud of you.
That's great. My dad actually they grew up here in D.C., went to McKinley Tech. My mother graduated from McKinley Tech just up the street from here, and gave me a lot of opportunity. And I just tried to take the ball and run as far as I could with it. But they really supported me and
definitely
me all the way through. So.
And you have a pretty impressive career. I'm not going to read the whole thing. We'll be here reading forever. But I see that you joined the AmeriCorps and you also did some community engagement leader for Impact in Silver Spring. Worked with the ACLU as a legislative assistant.
Yep.
Seeing that you was also appointed to the director at the Department of Homeland Security under President Barack Obama back in 2010.
Awesome.
Then of course I know you came in initially as in the Maryland House of Delegates.
That's right.
And now you moved on to Senate as of 2016. So I mean, you've had a amazing career, and we're going to get more into the details of that as we talk further later on in the show. But it's just a pleasure to have you on. You've done a lot, and I mean, you look good.
I appreciate it.
You can't be that much older than I am. So I'm like, wow,
No, it's good stuff, but it goes back to my parents just instilling me a purpose of going into public service and doing the right thing and just kind of staying locked in and focused. And it's been great, and it's been an amazing opportunity to serve in federal government and in working as a civil rights attorney, and then also in state government. it's been tremendously rewarding. It's been great.
Yeah, a lot of broad base experience.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be very helpful for the conversation we're going to have with you today. But before we go there, those who watch the show know we have to give out these to hell withs, and we got to give out these blessing twos. To hell with, I mean, I think people can see it a mile away, but got to give it to the Sacramento police shooting of the young black man, Stephon Clark. 20 times. And I mean, it could be argued it was dark and all that. You can maybe easily mistake a phone, but there's two things that I probably had an issue with. One is they shot him 20 times. And I know that from being a military police officer, you only have 10 rounds in those weapons. So that means they emptied them out. Second thing that I found wrong with it is that they already knew that they were on the scene because somebody was burglarizing vehicles. Now, I'm not trying to say that he's an angel or a saint. If he was indeed the one doing it, it would seem so if he's hiding in his grandmother's backyard at the time, the way he was dressed, possibly. But even then, we can't prove whether or not he was the one doing it, but because they never found anything on him. But the thing is like, even if you do suspect that this guy is doing that particular crime, people who commit that crime typically are not toting around guns. They normally don't have a weapon on them. I can understand if they said he just robbed a bank, if he just robbed a convenience store, or even if he's like a known drug dealer on a corner. I get it. Those guys carry guns because either they're trying to intimidate the money out of you, or they're trying to protect themselves from other people that live that lifestyle from taking stuff from them. I get it, but this guy wasn't that. He was, simply smashing open cars or whatever, possibly, or allegedly doing that. And then they empty gun clips on him. It doesn't make sense. And you have a whole utility belt full of other things, tasers,
non-lethal weapons. Yeah,
exactly. They could have tased him, pepper spray. There's so many different things they could have done to put him down. Meanwhile, we have Cruz, and we have the guy that shot up Colorado, in Aurora, Colorado. We have all these other shootings where these guys live unless they take their own life. So where's the disconnect that there's overforce for kids who carry Arizona iced tea and some Skittles, and then there's no force used, and everybody's so amicable when it's a white terrorist. I'll jump out there. I won't put those words in your mouth. No. I'll jump out there and call it what it is. So you got to give it to hell with that. That's very concerning.
No, I mean, I can't agree with you more. I mean, it's just like we're in the beginning months of this year, 2018. You've already had several instances like this.
Yeah.
Not only just forget the school shootings aside. I mean, that this is something that's perpetuated and perpetuates the complicated relationship between communities of color and over police communities of color and law enforcement. And when you look at something like this, no matter what the person was alleged to have done, it doesn't matter. The use of lethal force, 20 rounds. Almost, I mean, this is inexcusable, and look, not knowing all the details, not being on the ground, you're only use lethal force if you think that your life is in danger, and if you've neutralized the threat, I think you've more than done that with more than 20 rounds. So it's just, but the broader context that I think you have to start having the conversation about is, look, like, I mean, there is a racial component to this, so you put it out there. But it has to be put out there, right? I mean, because if you don't have that real conversation, you're never going to get to real solutions. And it's just it's tough, and it seems edgy, but it's not. I mean, it's just something you have to talk about if you're trying to really drill down to the genesis of the problem.
Exactly.
The communities of color had. And look, in our state and in Maryland, we deal with that all the time, especially in the crown jewel of our state, Baltimore City. So I mean, I know we're going to talk about that later, but still, it's something, a cycle that perpetuates, and it's something that you have to have that tough conversation.
You got to. So of course we're giving that a to hell with. Yeah. And the second one, politicians whose pockets are in the NRA. Look, I get it. I don't believe that, we can't support the Second Amendment and the ability to carry a weapon. I get that, but there's no reason why someone needs 100 drum rounds or bump stocks. I mean, a lot of these were used in these killings, but then in Parkland, a bump stock wasn't even used, and they still committed all these crimes, like killed 17 people, 14 students and 3 teachers or faculty members. So that was crazy.
I think just because I was down there at the march and just talking to different people, I think more people are focused more on the laws. So of course people want the age to be moved up to 21, but people are also saying, why don't we have it be stricter laws, like look at the mental health of the individual, look at their criminal history record, look at their family, all of these factors like they do in Japan, because if someone seems like they come from a family that may be volatile, more than likely that person probably should not have a gun. They probably need to go to some kind of rehabilitation type of program to, help them with whatever issues they have going on at home.
Yeah, so we talk about in Maryland, we have some of the strictest and some of the best gun safety laws in the country. I mean, we in 2015, 13, we limited assault style weapons. We limited the magazine size, and this year in the General Assembly, we're doing things for bump stocks. We've passed a ban for bump stocks that's yet to be signed by the governor, but we passed that. We've passed out of the House of Delegates, we passed a bill that would have a red flag. So if someone's exhibiting some sort of behavior that it seems that they're going to engage in some sort of violence, or if they're struggling with a mental health crisis, that the guns will be taken away. We've also got some bills that I was a sponsor of a piece of legislation that made sure that there was a process to get guns away from domestic abusers. So we're moving forward in Maryland. The problem is, we have porous borders, and the illegal guns that filter into Maryland are from West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and neighboring states. So, I mean, they're flooding into specifically Baltimore City. All of those, nearly, I think the statistic is something in the 90s. The percent of those guns that are used in those crimes are illegal guns, not from Maryland. So it's going to take a national solution for this, and I'm glad that the next generation is stepping the game up. And you saw that. I mean, you had 500,000 people down here yesterday marching for this. So, yeah. Couldn't agree with you all more on that.
Yeah, and speaking of that, so that was our To Hell With, but going into blessing season, we're kind of already segued there. March for Our Lives event was yesterday, down in D.C., but then also there was demonstrations out in Dallas, Chicago, Houston, St. Paul, Atlanta, New York,
even Cleveland.
Yeah, Cleveland.
I saw that.
Yeah, so a lot of people participated, and that was amazing to see. Even in Miami, there was a large protest and demonstration done out there. All of it seemed to be very peaceful. I mean, there was very few counter protests out there, but at the same time, I think the message came across. And what I was happy about is, and don't get me wrong, what's happened in Parkland, what happened in Aurora, Colorado, Sandy Hook, all Columbine, those are all horrible. And anytime a child dies, one child, that is one too many lives to be taken. But one thing I'm happy is they didn't overlook or forget that in Chicago they deal with gun violence daily. Detroit, right here, the jewel of our own state, Baltimore, and there was a lot of representation from high school students from those areas speaking on that. Even had a young lady from Virginia that she spoke out on just missing Black African American young women.
11-year-old.
Yeah, 11-year-old. Matter of fact, it was so awesome. And I think it's part of this long clip. Jay, if you play this clip for me. I can't even put in words how amazing this event was. Me and Kat was there representing TNGS, and it was amazing. It was so many people. It was just amazing to see this, and to see young people engaged and passionate about it. And then Martin Luther King's daughter, she was so cute.
Granddaughter.
Yeah.
She
real
was
cute.
so cute.
Yeah. So, Jay, roll that video for us, and then we'll keep it moving.
If there is a book that you want to read but it hasn't been written yet, you must be the one to write it.
We shouldn't blindly respect somebody because senator is in front of their name. Our job is to protect our country, and if our elected officials aren't doing it, we have to step up.
When will we as a nation understand that nonviolence is the way of life for courageous people?
Too many times has gunfire been ringing out in the hallways of schools across this country.
I have a dream that enough is enough.
And these are the people that are going to be leading our country really soon.
We are America's future.
And we must act on putting this civil inflicted war while we still can.
Welcome to the revolution.
The world is watching us.
If you listen real close, you can hear the people in power shaking.
Everyone has been affected by gun violence, and we're willing to come together to try to stop this.
It's been forever, and we all been dealing with it longer than the Parkland students have.
They are demonstrating for change, and I think they're already having an effect.
I urge everyone here and everyone who hears my voice to join me in telling the stories that aren't told, to honor the girls, the women of color who were murdered at disproportionate rates in this nation.
We are survivors of a cruel and silent nation.
We also know that we stand in the shadow of the Capitol, and we know that we have 7 short years until we too have the right to vote. Yeah,
that young lady kind of stole the show. Shout out to the Washington Post for that clip that we used. But yeah, I mean, it was just an amazing event, and I mean, like, I got chills again, almost goosebumps watching it, like I did when I first time watching it live yesterday. And then there was some great performances out there. It was nice to see people like Miley Cyrus come out and support. Common, of course, who's always involved. He's been engaged through his whole career. That's been a big thing for him. But then also like Vic Mensa, the other young lady. I can't think of her name, but she does the song "Rise Up." I can't think of her name right now, but amazing performance.
Final performance.
Yeah. So I mean, it was just amazing time yesterday. It was happy to be a part of that, and definitely blessings to that. And just high school students, that's amazing, or middle school or elementary school, the 11-year-old, and then got to give a shout out to Byron Island, black comedian, actually just purchased the Weather Channel for $300 million.
I saw that.
Yeah, people didn't even know that Byron Island had money like that. Pockets kind of deep, but purchased the Weather Channel. And I mean, you could do nothing but go up with that, because I remember back in the day walking to Weather Channel, it was just jazz music and the forecast.
Yeah.
And they added some things.
Yeah.
So I mean, they'll probably put reality TV on there somehow. But yeah, like that was cool. And then shout out to Jay-Z and Diddy. They're to collaborate on an app that will give locations of black-owned businesses. But I don't want to take away from the organizations and websites that already do that. So although they're doing that, that's great. Don't forget, we still have Where You Came From, We Buy Black, Support Black-Owned, Izania, and then also Moving. Also websites or apps where you could go to and find that same information. But I'm pretty sure with the money and affluence they have, they could probably push it to a larger level. So it would be kind of cool to see them team up with those guys and get it done. But we want to get down to the nitty gritty. We know we have Will Smith Jr. here, Maryland Senator, and for District 20, Tacoma Park, Montgomery County, Silver Spring. And really, like I said, really excited to be here. And, for our guests that don't know, we were talking a little bit before, but you're from the area, and like, what of all things, like, what decided, like, I'm gonna go into politics? What kind of got you to there? Was it a gradual thing from your experiences and your various jobs, or how did that come about?
I think it's your parents. Your parents have the most influence over almost anything you do. And my dad, I mean, like I said, he grew up right around the corner from here, and and so we were local folks. They moved up to Silver Spring to have kids, to the suburbs. And I remember when I was little, he'd bring me in and he'd have a cutout of a newspaper article from the Washington Post, and he'd say, "Look, like, you need to read this, and we need to talk about this." And I was just trying to go in and get some money to go to the movies or just go out or whatever. So I was trying to get $5, $20, and I really hated this. I didn't like it, right? So, but he'd always, at the end of the conversation, he'd take the little article and he'd put it up on this bulletin board that he had in his little home office. And so over the years, this whole thing, just like the whole wall was full of conversations. And so when I started stepping back a little bit, and went to law school, and my dad actually passed away on my first day of law school. So I came back. So I came back. I drove up from Virginia, and I remember going into the house, and you go in, and there's a wall full of all the conversations that we had. And I think you started to realize, like, that's exactly the education that your parents are giving to you when you're not, you don't really realize it. So I think he was always talking to me about Adam Clayton Powell Jr., and he was really obsessed with, like, the young African-American politicians that got into the game. At that point, it was Harold Ford Jr. and Cory Booker were still first coming on the scene. And so he was very interested in teaching me about their careers and their paths. So I think growing up in D.C. in the area, in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and then also just having someone that would sit me down and kind of slow walk me through some of the issues of the day got me into it. And one thing led to another. You get involved, and once you get involved, you get more involved, and one thing leads to another, and opportunities open up to serve in different capacities. And so I've taken every opportunity I could get and tried to max out.
And that's awesome. And it's nice to see you that you came back, and serving in a community that raised you and made you to pour back into that. That's also amazing, because you always hear these stories, or there's this misconception that black people become successful and we forget where we come from, that in order to reach the upper echelons of success or have true success, it means you have to turn your back on where you came from. And I'm happy to say that every politicians we had on this forum, you all have served in your area. You guys know each other. And it says something that this whole idea of that a black elitism means you can't touch the people where you come from. That's not true. I don't see that at all with our local leaders. Everybody's very grounded in this kind of like grassroots and really getting the work done. So it's a pleasure to know that.
I have a question.
Sure.
Being that you are a senator, for our viewers, what exactly do you have power to vote on? Like, do you guys vote on, for example, Easy Pass and the fees that are associated with Easy Pass? Do you have power to vote on gun laws? And I guess the main question I have is, for people like myself who are common individuals, how can we communicate with you so that our voices are heard and that when you guys do vote, you're thinking about the issues that we raise to the table?
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier before we came on, and it was like, if you asked anyone who is your state delegate or who's your state senator, 90% of the people probably wouldn't know, or they couldn't pick out a state delegate from a lineup. Mm-hmm. But these folks in local government, we have more control over your daily lives than the folks in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And because we control literally everything from your school funding to your roads to gun control in the state of Maryland. So it's a big deal. So I'd say that folks we're just a Google search away, but you can email or call the office, and if they're not responsive to you, then it's a problem, especially on the local level. We get phone calls, I respond to them, I call back, I write everyone back that writes in. I meet with people constantly in the community. This is the most closely connected apparatus of government to the people that we have. And so if it's not responsive to you and you don't know who those people are, then you're cut out of this entire conversation. Mm-hmm. And you wonder about housing policy, why there's not enough affordable housing, why the transportation policy is bad, and you don't have metro that works, or a purple line, or a transit line, a red line in Baltimore that can get you from one place to another with relative ease and controlled cost. When you talk about why your schools are failing, all those things are controlled by the state legislatures.
Okay.
And so folks that don't wake up and understand that are completely cutting themselves out of the conversation, and they don't realize how much power they have to influence and to make sure that those folks know what's going on. So yeah, that's it.
I do have one good question.
Sure.
You are a state legislator for the 20th district in Montgomery County.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that you only oversee that area, or do you have power to make decisions for the entire state of Maryland?
So I always say that when you're a state senator or state delegate, you represent your district, then your county, and then the statewide.
Okay.
So you vote on legislation, in terms of where you come from.
Okay.
So the interests that I'm always representing are people that are in my district, and then I start thinking about who are the people in the county at large, and then I think what's the best for the state. But I always think what's best for my district first.
Okay.
The short answer is, look, if you're a state delegate or a state senator, you vote on laws that affect the entire state. No matter if you live in Washington County, Allegheny County, or Montgomery County, the stuff that you're voting on affects all of us. So it's a statewide position in that sense. But the reason why, you have 47 senators and 141 delegates, and they come from every corner of the state. Someone's from Southern Maryland or someone's from Western Maryland has a completely different worldview than I have coming from the suburbs of Washington, D.C. So when you get people into a room together and you start talking about education policy or criminal justice reform or access to college and education or housing policy, you've got some very disparate views, and that, I think that's exactly what it's supposed to be for the state. So it's really important for folks to kind of understand that, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does that become much of a challenge? Because, for instance, we always hear about, we've had Will Jawando on the show, who's running for county council at large in Montgomery County, and you're in Montgomery County, so you see how, and it's cool because you have Silver Spring and Tacoma Park, so there's a culture there that people just assume if you're in Montgomery County, oh, that's great, you've made it to the land of milk and honey.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people don't realize how much of the focus of that is on Rockville and Bethesda
and Potomac and Chevy Chase. And
right.
Bethesda.
Because they're the drivers behind what makes Montgomery County what it is. But then once you start getting out to Gaithersburg and you start getting out into Silver Spring,
East County, and
you see it's a different world, from just the people who live there, and that's what we see and what opportunities those schools are really getting versus the Walton Paytons and the BCCs of the world, right? So. Does that become a challenge, when you're trying to, bring that to the table, and then you have people possibly in PG or Anne Arundel or some of the people in the Baltimore County area, they're trying to get folks who maybe they live in a bubble of protection, they're not really sensitive to hey, look, I understand you guys feel like this Maryland is amazing and things have been going well for you, but my kids here don't necessarily have access to education and jobs the way you think everyone does is because we're in Montgomery County.
Yeah, that's one. Everyone thinks Montgomery County is this rich county, which it is, but there really is a tale of several different counties within Montgomery County. It is tough to bring that message to the state because everyone's like, well, if you're talking to Baltimore City, for instance, they're saying, well, we got real problems, but if you dive down and look at what Montgomery County is, it's the most diverse county in the state. It's the largest county in the state. But there's a very big difference between a certain corridor and another corridor, like down county, East County, Gaithersburg is very different. So, for instance, I'll put it in the context of school funding.
Okay.
When we did school funding, and when we go back every year, we ask for money because our school system is the largest in the state, and we're growing faster than anyone else. We're growing at about 2,600 students every year. Baltimore City is a city of about just north of 600,000 people. I think they're maybe a little bit more than that, and they're trying to get money to revamp their schools and to modernize their schools so they can attract the population that they need for a thriving city, which is really built for 1 million plus. We, on the other hand, need the money to accommodate the population that we have, and we're growing at, like I said, a small high school every year, and it's a very diverse population. We have an immigrant population. We have needs for multiple languages to be taught. We've got a wide strata of people that are people with parents are making six figures, and then people's parents their incomes require their children to be on free and reduced meals. So we've got, especially in my district, which is East County and down, so Silver Spring, Long Branch, those are the areas you find more immigrant populations and more people of color, obviously, but then also you've got some affluence, real core pockets of affluence, but then right next door you've got some real families that are really struggling. And so it's important to make sure that when people come in from out of Montgomery County, they don't just see the new civic center or the new library or whatever, the Gucci new whatever. They also come down to see some of the schools that are really struggling too, so that the people get a real full picture of what Montgomery County is like. Got it. And then and how do how do you guys end up partnering eventually? Because obviously you have those differences, but then at some point you have to work together, get the stuff done. And how does that accomplish? Are you guys seeing enough of each other that I understand what's going on in Baltimore, and then we vote, we can bring together legislation that really benefits all of us, or does it still become kind of like at the end of the day, I have to fight for what's going on here, or does it, does it ever come to a point where it's like, we'll pass laws that's going to benefit PG, this corridor of Anne Arundel in Baltimore County, and then at the same time take care of, some of these areas here. Does that understanding ever come about, or does that, is that still a real struggle? It's still a struggle, but it happens. So again, for the school funding, we, that first year right before I got there, Baltimore got the lion's share of money and investment, and then said, look, Montgomery County will need some stuff next time around. So it worked out that way, but sometimes it's just a matter of who goes first, but you still have to. Generally, I think we all come together and try to make it work and try to educate ourselves on what the other districts look like. So, and we're all trying to move, the whole state forward too. So, it's a tough process, but it's something that happens all the time. Got it.
My question is about when it comes to, let's say, for instance, business loans, redlining, housing. How much do you guys think about equal opportunity for all individuals? Because obviously people of color or people who don't have the money probably won't be able to benefit or be able to get the resources that someone with affluence may have. Do you guys set laws that say, as an example, we're going to make sure that at least 30% of low income has access to this, or is it not ever looked at in that capacity?
It is. So we do have law. Counties usually do the laws for zoning for, moderately priced dwelling units. What percentage, if they're going to let a developer come in, you say you need 5% or 10% of, affordable housing in each one. But in the statewide, I had a bill this year and last year that was dealt with. We called it the Home Act, but it dealt with discrimination. Discrimination based on your source of income, your legal source of income. So if you had, alimony, veterans benefits, Social Security, or you were on a housing voucher, the Section 8, then an apartment unit could say, no, we're not going to take that. And so what has happened is you've had clusters, concentrations of poverty, and people don't have access to, area codes of opportunity. So, for instance, you're basically, and if you look at Baltimore, right? Baltimore used to have, forget the federal redlining that always happened, but Baltimore until 1911 had an Office of Discrimination that was, their whole mission was to set forth policies that would keep, black folks in certain neighborhoods and then cut them off from access to capital to be able to buy homes. And so when you look at the wealth gap in Baltimore City or even in Maryland generally or in the United States, it's because the number one driver of wealth in terms of families is home ownership first, and then you diversify assets and move on, and then when you pass away, you give your home or your assets to your children, and then they have a little bit more of a head start. Well, if you've been choked off from that opportunity, from slavery to Jim Crow and to the 1900s, you wonder why there's a vicious cycle that happens, and housing is a really big part of that. I mean, all this stuff is very interconnected. That's why I talk about housing and transportation and education. It's all piecemeal, but it's so interconnected. And the housing piece is a big driver of not only poverty, not only lack of access, not only lack of black wealth, but also it perpetuates a situation in which you have this a city that has a crime rate, and it's people don't know how to touch it or how to affect it and how to stop it, and it's not going to be a one-stop solution. It has to be with empowering ourselves and giving ourselves access to that capital and that wealth, and it starts with housing policy. I mean, I think it's very stark. It's a really long history of that, so it's something that the Home Act would have prevented that type of policy from being implemented. Unfortunately, It didn't go anywhere. I mean, they passed it out of the House. It didn't even get out of my committee. It's never passed both houses at the same time, and so we're going to try again early next year when there's no election year and the NIMBYism has gone away and people aren't so afraid in certain jurisdictions, and we can get some policy done that I think will really change people's lives moving forward. So
sorry,
no.
Staying on that same wave of questioning, who sets the market value for housing in apartments? Like, I know for a fact, since I've moved here back in 2013, I've seen the ask for apartment rent go up. Like, I don't know the percentage, but it's like consistently going up. And I feel like people's jobs and the income coming in is not going up at the same rate that the ask is.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, is there a law that can cap that? How are apartments able to charge, $2,500, knowing that that population generally who's renting can't really afford it?
So it's fine. We've had laws. So we had another bill for rent stabilization, rent control, essentially. In Tacoma Park, we have that.
Okay.
So it can't go up but for a certain percentage every year. So no matter what's happening around D.C., Maryland, that you're going to have some access to affordable housing for folks. But in Montgomery County, we don't have it, and in the state, we don't have it. Nowhere else do we have it except for that one place. And we have proposed statewide legislation. It always gets shot down by developers who they want the financial incentives to come in, put in big units and then charge whatever they want to charge, so they can, obviously they're in it for money. This is a money business.
Right.
Whatever the market will bear as far as they're concerned, that's what they're going to take out. So, in the county council level, you need folks that are going to have a progressive vision. And we've got a couple folks running. I mean, Will's one of those guys. Mark and George Leventhal and Mark Elrich are the two people that have really been focused on this issue too, for extracting more from developers, more investment in the local community, more commitment to saying, hey, look, if you're going to come in here and build this new place, you got to have 15, 20% affordable housing, and you're not going to make as much on here, but that's why we're going to allow that's how we're going to allow you to come here and build. But you need people that are willing to stand up to developers, and that's the conversation that's going on since time immemorial, honestly.
I can keep going, but go ahead, because I know I can go.
No, but I'm still staying in line with that.
Okay.
So a lot of times, you see the stats, and I think you've kind of like really laid on a very local level why this is. One thing that's been shocking people over the last couple of years is that the studies show that if you're white, more than likely your chances of being equally as wealthy or more so than your parent, you have a greater chance. But if you're black, you are 69% more likely to be poor than the previous generation. And that's sad, because it's like, okay, it doesn't matter if Beyonce and Jay-Z's your dad, or if it's just the guy that drives the bus, you have a 70% chance equal across the board that you're going to be poorer than them the next generation. And I think, laws like what you're trying to get, the Home Act and stuff like that passed will help, take chunks out of that percentage, because now, I can actually pass something down to my family and it means something for them coming in. But when you see like the prices just shooting up out of the window, and it's like, how do you keep with that? And then there's a lot of pressure. I've seen it right here in D.C. There's a lot of pressure economically for someone to want to sell, because it's like, I mean, I'm only bringing in $75,000 a year, or I'm only bringing in $55,000 a year, and you know, I have this grandparent that has a house. It needs a lot of work. They bought it back in the day for $30,000. I got this guy knocking on my door saying, "Hey, look, I'll give you $800."
Yeah.
But next door, that same row house is going for 1.5.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm not in a position to even do anything with this one, so I gotta have no choice but to sell. And then, of course, when they resell that house, they're gonna sell it for way more than $800.
But is that because we're not in the know as a people as to the value of it, or is it because there are laws set in place that keep us from the access to make money off of this property potentially?
No, I think some of these are the vestiges of the old laws that come in that are still. Look, I mean, my mother. I'm 20 years younger than my closest sibling, but my mother was born my mother and father were born in the 30s. So they still live in the same. You know, my dad passed away, but my mom lives in the same house that she grew up in. She moved back, you know, after I left for college, and so she lives off 12th off of Rhode Island Avenue, not like 10 minutes away from here. And it's funny, the neighborhood, you know, when they moved in, it was a half Jewish, half black neighborhood. Then it became predominantly black, and then now that the city is changing, you know, the neighborhood on her left is you know, young white couple, and then 2 doors down is two professors from Catholic University, both white. And then so the neighborhood is just changing. She's had a lot of pressure, and so have her neighbors, because a lot what was able to happen in these enclaves is people were able to hold on to the homes, and some of the homestead that Marion Barry helped pass allowed people to get locked in for tax rates so that they wouldn't have to pay some of the exorbitant property tax rates, so people could stay in their homes. That happened, and it worked because people were staying in, and you know, my mom now lives in the house that her mom bought. And so that generational wealth started to accrue, and now you start sniffing out, and people start offering you a quick, fast check. You may want to cash out, and you may leave. You may not realize the value of your house, what your value of your house will be in 10 more years. You just hold on for 5 more years or 10 more years. So that's one thing, education, but then also, again, it's the vestiges of the laws that we've had not only in D.C. but in Baltimore, Maryland, and Virginia, everywhere. So it's
you alluded to this earlier in the conversation.
Yeah.
For our viewers, I really want you to explain the importance of your zip code and how that can help dictate your credit. I actually didn't know that until talking to Juan.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute. And, you know, I have degrees, but that's not something that's taught. So, and he was telling me that, you know, a lot of his colleagues heard about this from like young age, like, you know, you can stay and live with mom and dad because we live in this zip code. It's going to help your credit score. And I'm just like, I never was educated that way. So for our viewers, if you can explain how that works, I think it'd be important for them to know, because perhaps they will think about this when they decide they want to buy a home.
There's some things like that, not only for credit scores, access to capital, but also for insurance.
Okay.
I mean, we passed a law last year. Delegate Charles Sidnor from Baltimore County, he led the fight on this with the Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition, and they found that insurance rates for people of color and then certain zip codes were extremely high. I mean, I'm not just talking about just inside Beltway, outside of Beltway, but for certain neighborhoods, they were extremely high or really restrictive coverage. And so we put in some good consumer protection laws for that to prevent that practice. But that was just last year. So not only that, but also your credit scores and your access to good education. I mean, a lot of the drivers for the funding for education is property tax. So, I mean, when you don't have access to those, you know, area codes of opportunity, then you're locked out of the, you know, Maryland dream, American dream, Montgomery County dream, whatever you want to call it. You're locked out of that. And you see that a lot in Baltimore City, which is why the Home Act is so important, because people have jobs, sometimes 2 jobs, but the schools aren't the best, and the amenities for, you know, you're in a food desert, the amenities for fresh produce, for after-school activities, all those wraparound services aren't there. And all you need is a couple generations, a couple kids to kind of go up and then come back to the city, come back to the neighborhood, and reinvest their talent. And that's all it takes. But this type of area code discrimination happens all the time. It has devastating effects.
And I know you have quite a few bills that you've sponsored, that you've been a part of, that kind of combat that. I know a big thing for you has been equal pay. So, and because that's 2 parts of the conversation. You know, you have equal pay, but then also increasing minimum wage, because the skill set jobs are depleting. That's something that you speak about in your vision for Maryland. And we see it all around us. I mean, it used to be a time that, you know, you could go to tech school and you're gonna get good work as a plumber
Yeah.
or as an electrician, and it's still there. But we know that developers play dirty at times and on ways of trying to get that done as cheap as possible, and they're not really bringing in the skill set people. And I think you've said this in interviews in the past that people are working 2 or 3 jobs to make things work. But then once again, if we have nothing to protect their the taxes and the inflection of that, or just the way things are going up, and once again you said outside of Tacoma Park, there's nothing to really protect how rent is increasing. We have to do something to make pay better. So I guess maybe you could talk a little bit about some of those, but I know you work quite a bit on that.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll start with equal pay. I mean, we did for equal pay for equal work. I mean, that's been the law of the land since Lilly Ledbetter, and then obviously when Obama came in and pushed that on the federal level. But then there were still some gaps to fill with respect to the states. So, for instance, you could still inquire your employment history, like what did you make last year and what did you make the year before, and so if you started off making less than your, let's say, your white counterparts or than your male counterparts, then your employment history and your salary history is going to be less all the way through. So what we've done is we had a lot of great work on that last session and this session to say, look, you can't use that as a component of hiring for a state job, for a state government job. And so we've moved forward with some of those measures. For expanding the minimum wage, we did the right thing in Montgomery County. We're on our path to $15 an hour. So is Prince George's, so is Washington, D.C. I think Mayor Pugh has interest in doing that in Baltimore City, too.
Awesome.
It's not just, it's changed. Things are changing. I mean, before it used to be the seasonal worker or the high schooler that used to make minimum wage. And now people, I mean, it's a way of life. And sometimes people are working, 2 and 3 jobs to keep a roof over their head. And so when you have the minimum wage at $10.10, which is what it's going to be in June, and in Montgomery County, the living wage is something closer to 20. There's a huge gap there.
Yeah.
People working 2 jobs can't afford to make ends meet, and that's just something that's not right. And so what we've done is we move forward with that, and we've had legislation in the statewide, and it hasn't passed yet, but we're going to continue to work on it.
Yeah, and I mean, when you bring that up, I mean, like that number, and I didn't know that number. So, when you're talking like getting minimum wage to $10.10, but you said the living wage, what it takes to survive or live comfortably is 20. Then
in Montgomery County,
in Montgomery County,
yeah.
And we know that fluctuates, but that means the numbers also fluctuate depending where you live. Yeah. That's crazy because then that kills your quality of life, right?
Oh, it saps it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then and then they wonder where, like, okay, well, why are there kids out here roaming around breaking into car windows? We hear about that kind of stuff along, Briggs, Cheney area and all of that. But a lot of those parents are, immigrant parents. Some of them are very educated, but then when they come here, they're having a hard time getting a job with their skill set. So then they're doing those minimum wage type of jobs, and they're working 2 or 3 jobs, like you said, just to keep a roof over their head, and not a house, an apartment. Yeah. That for a 3-bedroom apartment out here, you're going to easily pay $1,800 or better. Yep. In that part, and that's like that's not the nicest area of Silver Spring, right? So then it's kind of like, and then that creates more issues where the kids are not properly engaged, or no one's going to be at home to make sure that Johnny's writing his book report, or making sure that Cindy's not out there hanging with the wrong crowd. So and then people just don't realize how much the finances really affect just everything that goes on. And and it kind of segues to another thing is you have a lot of stuff towards giving people with criminal backgrounds a second chance. Because we realize not all criminals are created equal. I mean, some people are just criminals of, of lack. It's like, it's not that I actually want to go out there and live this lifestyle, but because I was lacking X, Y, Z, I did what I did to survive. I mean, it's the only way I could. And I like the fact that you're trying to give people back their voting rights and trying to set up things for those with that background to have a better life. You have some legislation on that. Maybe you can speak to our listeners on that.
That's right. When I first got into the Assembly, we had something called the Second Chance Act, which would essentially shield nonviolent convictions, not expunge expanding expungement opportunities, but shield those nonviolent convictions to give people access to get into school, to get a job. That was a big victory. The second year I was up there, we did something called the Justice Reinvestment Act, which was the biggest overhaul of our criminal justice system ever in Maryland. Mm-hmm. And what it was doing is it basically cleaned out all the mandatory minimums and for nonviolent drug crimes, and cleaned out a lot of those offenses and steered more toward treatment. And we showed that we could save $250 million a year if you folks that were incarcerated for stupid drug offenses, and get people treatment and out of the system, and then give folks a second chance to get on the right path, you'd save a lot of money. I mean, for the Republicans, that made a lot of sense because it saves money, right? So this is an efficient argument. For some of the other folks, it was more of a social justice issue. So that was a big deal to move forward. We've done a little bit more of that in terms of expanding opportunities for banning the box for access to college applications. So when you're filling out a college application, you don't have to check off that you've been arrested. You don't have to check off you had a conviction until after your application has been reviewed. That's another big hurdle. So we've been constantly pushing that way. Voting rights is a big deal. Before I got there, if you were a returning citizen, you had a felony record, you couldn't vote. We repealed that. And then the second year I got there, we expanded that repeal to include people that were still under judicial supervision, parole, probation. This affects 40,000 Marylanders every year. You can still vote. And we're still moving in that direction to re-enfranchise people and make sure that folks have access to government and to make sure that they have a seat at the table when policies affecting everybody are there, so they get a chance to participate in democracy too. So we've been doing that a lot, and we made a lot of good progress. But look, a big thing we've had this year is the governor put forward 3 bills this year in response to our record number of murders in Baltimore City. There's something we had to do something. And in those bills, you had a lot of mandatory minimums for violent offenses. And that, you start thinking about, you can't incarcerate your way out of a problem. The mandatory minimums have had an adversely negative impact on communities of color, especially the black community in the 80s and in the early 90s. And so that we know that's not a formula for success. So you have to balance between making sure that violent, reoffenders get what is needed in terms of reducing the recidivism, getting people out of that violent crime, but also investing in programs that work and provide opportunity. So the Senate put forth a bill, rejected the governor's bill, and put forward a bill that did raise some, for some incarceration times for second-time violent offenders. All was parolable and suspendable, but it did raise those, possible jail times, but also invested a record amount of money in safe streets programs, recidivism programs, education programs. So there was some sort of a balance. We'll see what it does. The House is going to take their look at it. I mean, if I had my druthers, I'd say the House should take out a lot of the enhancements and focus more on deterrence and opportunity.
Definitely.
But there's a fine balance. When you talk to people, some of the victims, not only are in this instance in Baltimore, most of the perpetrators of crime are people of color, but all but 3, I think, of the victims last year were young, people of color. So I mean, that's a big thing to think about. And so, like I said, it's all interconnected, but that's the biggest thing we're doing with criminal justice this year. We also have some things with debtors' prison too. We can talk about later too. But
because and those numbers reflect on a national scale. I mean, I think it's like 56% of all gun violence were the victims of those were young black children. So when you start looking at, and I'm happy to see that, as you call yourself, you guys, the next generation of lawmakers here in Maryland, or just the DMV area, period, you guys are looking at, systematically what has created this issue before we just slap more jail time or more punishment or more takeaways for that person's livelihood. Because after they serve their time is served. I mean, how can we bring them back into the community if you're shunned out? I mean, you have no choice but to go back to a life of crime. Well, I can't vote. I can't get a decent job. I can't live here. I can't live there. Well, what else do I do except going back to the life of crime? That's the only thing welcome me back. That's right. Despite all the the problems with that, it's the only thing that's welcome me, or like putting out a helping hand. So I'm happy that you guys are trying to really look at the core, what brings it there, because we see the reverse all the time. When it's the opioid crisis.
That's right.
Versus the crack epidemic, or when it's white kids shooting up schools versus kids getting killed by gun violence every day in Chicago. There's a different response to both. One, they're automatically animals, and the other one is like, but he's troubled. But that troubled young man also ended 17 lives.
That's right.
So I'm happy that you guys are looking at it that way.
And I wanted to follow what you were saying, because when the judge was here, she was saying that when they did a study, people automatically associate crime with being black. Even African Americans associate that. So on the criminal justice level, when you're making laws, what can we do so psychologically as a society we can start giving African Americans a fair playing field? Furthermore, are we also looking at the conditions of people in jail? Because I mean, I know we're talking about laws when they come out, but when you put somebody in that kind of environment, most of our jails are not a place to help transform one's behavior. In fact, it makes it worse because you have men that are getting raped. You have men that deal with a lot of mental health. You have men that are fearing for their lives. I mean, there are a lot of things that go on in jail that are just not humane. And then you put them back out into society, like Juan said, and then you don't have a license, and then you can't vote. And so it's just like, I wonder, I don't know what you guys have in place, but are we really looking at the entire process of the criminal justice system and how we can, especially black men, make sure that when they are treated fairly or judged fairly, but B, when they come out, that they actually have a fair opportunity to transform their lives and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think to answer your first part of the question is, you need more, black elected officials. You need more people that are at the table, and that was a big thing that I said from the start, and that's why I've been trying to help out a lot of, we've got a record number of people running for office, a record number of women running for office. We also have a record number of people of color running for office, and supporting people that have different backgrounds and experiences and have an understanding of what you're talking about is really important, because if your voice isn't at the table, you're never going to get consideration. I sit in the Judicial Proceedings Committee. We have 3 African Americans on the committee. That committee deals disproportionately with things that affect communities of color, and you've only got 3 African Americans and no one from Baltimore City. So it's something that's no one from the city on that committee. So it's an important thing that the more voices of color you have, the more black voices you have in office, the more the policies will reflect some of the priorities of our community. So that's a number one thing, to make sure that those voices that are heard. Second, for the treatment of folks that are incarcerated, I've went with the ACLU and a couple other members of the community, of the criminal justice reform community. We went to a couple of jails, spent a couple days in Maryland in jail, in a prison, and just to kind of walk through the day of the life, try to understand. And you're right, it's not a conducive environment for, rehab, rehabilitation, and reintegration. And when you read in Maryland, like the prison system, it says corrections. So you're supposed to correct behavior. There is a punitive nature there, but the ultimate goal is to get folks out of there and never come back. And so there are lots of things like diminution credits, DIM credits, that are given to incentivize people from getting in classes. We have to continue to provide more opportunities for education, to get degrees while you're incarcerated, or skills. I mean, these are things that people, they say, look, how can you invest in educational opportunities for someone that's incarcerated when we still have a broken school system out, and so that's a hard argument to make. And people in the corrections don't have a lobbyist down in Annapolis or down in Washington D.C. is hard, so it's a tough argument to make, but it's something that I think this next generation and a lot of folks that have come before us are really sensitive to and have continued to have that dialogue. And I think we've got so much work to do.
I know.
But I think we've done a good job, shows like this, keeping that at the forefront so that people are still paying attention to it.
I have one time, it's really quick, because like you were saying, if people are inspired, is there a prerequisite to run? No. Like, can anybody run?
Anyone, as long as you meet the residency requirements and the age requirements.
Okay.
So you've lived in your community for, I think, 9 months. You can check me on this. 9 months before the date of the primary election, and you're a citizen and you're old enough, then you're good to go.
Well, that's good to know. And then and we're about to run out of time. Right. But I guess before we close out, one thing you mentioned how we don't have enough representation, and then for Maryland to be so diverse, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say you're the first black state senator from Montgomery County, correct?
Right.
Let's clap that up.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so it's amazing, but then almost sad at the same time, because it's like the first in 2016.
Yep.
This is after a black president.
Yep.
We're still seeing so many firsts, but it's happy to see that we have a record number of people now going for these. Is there anybody? We have so much. We only have a little bit of time left. Is there anybody that you would want to shout out that who's actively running? Or, I don't know if that gets kind of tricky when you do that.
No, Jenelle Wilkins, she's a delegate right now. She was appointed when I left the House of Delegates. She ran, so she's appointed. She's running for election. Okay. She's in the position now. She is an immigrant. She is a civil rights activist. She is brilliant. She's beautiful. She's actually doing an amazing job in the position. So she's asking the voters to come back to Annapolis. And then Delegate Pam Queen from another district. So Delegate Jenelle Wilkins is the first African American woman to represent my district
Yeah.
in
Wow.
the House of Delegates, and Pam Queen is the first African American woman to represent her district in her district, so in Montgomery County. So these are folks that are coming back and have done a tremendous job, and have been lifting up a voice that hasn't been there. So that's something I would give a shout out to those two candidates in
Awesome.
particular with a short period of time. A lot more people to go to, but
Got
I'd
it.
save those two.
Well, we're going to have you back on again. It's been a
Yes.
great conversation. There was still so many things we can talk about because there's so much in your vision. There's a lot of legislation that you've been a part of, and I want people to make people aware. So we got to have you coming back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really, we got to have you come back. It was just a pleasure speaking with you. You seem to be very passionate. Do you have any final words or where people can find you if they want to reach out to you?
Sure, you go to smithformaryland.com. You can find me on Facebook at Will Smith for Senate, and Twitter at Will Smith Jr. So hit me up on social media or Facebook, and we'll be in touch.
Awesome. Kat, can you tell them where they can find the Nitty Gritty Show?
Absolutely. You guys can follow us at The Nitty Gritty Show on IG, Facebook, and YouTube. And we're working on our Twitter to get it more active. But yes, you can follow us at those social media handles.
Well, look, it's been a great show. Will, once again, pleasure having you, sir.
Thank you so much.
You've done so much in the community, and I see you very
absolutely.
active.
It was great.
We met you at an actual volunteering
That's
event,
right. Yeah,
so
yeah.
we know that you're out there. Thank you for coming on, and then we're gonna have you back.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So hey guys, it's been a great show. Make sure you go out there and vote. Primaries is when?
June 26th.
June 26th.
Yep, that's right.
So
June
got to get a
26th.
primary. Maryland's a
80 days.
closed state, so if you're not a registered Democrat or Republican, you can't even participate, right?
That's right. So you have to register one party or another to get on those things. But yep, got to register.
So a lot of great people out there, and sometimes the only way to make sure that they get reelected, you got to vote for them in the primary first, and then the actual election will be in November, right?
That's right, November 8th, I think, this year.
All right.
Is there a cutoff date to decide if you're Democrat or Republican?
No, I think you've got about 15 days before the election to do that. So you got time, but not too much time.
All right, so you guys, you pretty much need to be making your way online or wherever you are to make sure you get signed up for a particular party so you can vote. I would prefer Democrat, but just make sure that you're utilizing your vote. All right, but look, it's been the Nitty Gritty Show. It's your boy Jay DeCosta,
And it's your girl Katniss.
Together we are
The Nitty Gritty.
We out. Blessings. March for our lives. Got some posters up. Will, thanks you for coming on again, sir. And we out here. You guys be blessed.